Welcome to another episode of Codo's Cinema, the podcast show where I talk about movies. I'm your host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Codo. Have you ever seen a film that came out on your birthday? Or a film that came out the same year you were born? Or the year that you were born, I should say. Well, let me tell you about a film that came out on November 3rd, 2017. Can you guess what film that is? Well, this film that came out on November 3rd, 2017 is Thor Ragnarok. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe hitting big with their films, Thor Ragnarok was the last film of the MCU for that year until 2018's Black Panther and 2018's Avengers Infinity War. On top of that, this third installment of the Thor franchise is considered by many people to be a huge improvement compared to the first two Thor films. I mean, the third Thor film was actually a pretty good film. I mean, it got positive reviews, gained a lot of money at the box office, and helped set up Avengers Infinity War. Although the first Thor film helped introduce the God of Thunder in a serious tone, it still did a pretty good job on telling the story due to the direction of Kenneth Branagh. The sequel, Thor: The Dark World, didn't really match well, albeit in a decent way, with Alan Taylor directing, with some studio interference. I mean, granted that the second sequel for Thor didn't really go well. I mean, some of the reviews were actually pretty positive, but many people consider it to be a not so good installment, but albeit good installment for the franchise. Taika Waititi would later step in to direct the third installment of the Thor franchise, and he took it in a different direction by adding in a little more humor, more color, and expanding the universe a little by going to different realms and locations. And yeah, pretty much. Multiple comic book storylines helped bring the plot of the film together, like the Ragnarok comic storyline and the Planet Hulk storyline. New characters such as Valkyrie, Hela, Grandmaster, Korg, and Scourge, returning characters that includes the Incredible Hulk, Doctor Strange, Loki, and many others. And of course, the God of Thunder himself, Thor. When the film came out in 2017, the film was well received by many critics, audiences, and fans. Many consider it to be the best Thor film. Well, we'll see about that when Thor: Love and Thunder when it will come out sometime in 2022 or something, I don't know. Anyway, and going back to November 3rd is actually my birthday, which is today, November 3rd. November 3rd is my birthday, folks. Yep, that's me. I'm actually 22. And that is why I'm actually reviewing this film, because Thor Ragnarok came out on November 3rd, 2017. And by the way, I was born on November 3rd, 1998. That's why I'm making the connection right there. Because that film, Thor Ragnarok, came out on November 3rd, 2017. And I was actually 19 at the time when I went to see Thor Ragnarok. So grab some popcorn, summon your Mjolnirs or Stormbreakers as I take you to the Asgardian world. And don't forget to summon your lightning powers. This is Thor Ragnarok. And as always, spoiler alert. The film opens up in the fiery realms of the underworld, where our hero Thor, played once again by Chris Hemsworth, is imprisoned and wrapped in chains. He is talking to a dead skeleton about weird dreams that he had. And on top of that, he actually had some pretty good improvisation on there. Basically, he was improvising towards a skeleton. Somehow, Thor is sent down to the center of the realm, where he meets up with the devil himself, Surtur, voiced by Clancy Brown. By the way, Taika Waititi does the motion capture for Surtur. Surtur is basically a giant, fire-like devil titan. Well, despite Surtur's short screen time, he is intimidating and all, especially fiery compared to the other comic book versions, and other media versions as well. By the way, I did mention Taika Waititi does the motion capture for Surtur as well, right? I mean, hey, the CGI fire is spot on. Or should I say, on fire. Thor wonders why Surtur is still alive because the one thing that Thor remembers is that his father Odin, played once again by Anthony Hopkins, fought Surtur in battle 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately for Surtur, he cannot die until he fulfilled his prophecy to destroy Asgard through Ragnarok, which is the fall of Asgard. In fact, many people who may or may not know that Ragnarok means Twilight of the Gods in mythology. For the film, it's kind of similar, but like as the fall of Asgard, meaning the destruction. Thor doesn't understand it because Thor keeps spinning around slowly in chains because technically he's in chains upside down, but with some pretty good humor right there during some intense moments. This gets Surtur to leave his throne to finish off Thor. But with Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song playing in the background and Mjolnir swinging in, Thor fights off Surtur and his fire demons. The fight choreography brings in a good callback to the first Thor film where Thor was fighting off the ice giants. Yeah, remember that? Remember that fight sequence in the first Thor movie where he was fighting off the ice giants? That was actually a pretty good callback too. Thor smashes the head of Surtur, and his crown actually comes off. Thor takes the crown back to Asgard. However, Thor struggles to get back to Asgard because the gatekeeper, who is supposed to be Heimdall, or not right now, Heimdall is not even there. Somehow there is a different gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is just distracted, but Thor is getting ambushed by a dragon from Surtur's world, and who is trying to burn Thor off. At one point, you guys might be thinking the gatekeeper Heimdall is distracted. As I mentioned, not really. There is a new gatekeeper named Scourge, played by Dr. Bones McCoy himself, Karl Urban, who left his doctoral position from the Starship Enterprise to become a gatekeeping god, who actually got a lot of stuff from a place called Texas. Oh, and 2 machine guns too. Down in the underworld, Thor is still fighting his demons as he is trying to summon the Bifrost back to Asgard, but the dragon catches up to him. Scourge finally gets Thor's attention and opens the Bifrost and grabs Thor and the dragon to Asgard. FYI, the title sequence of the Molten Steel with the original Thor theme playing in the background in a pop and rock style is the cherry on top of this great sequence, including the title sequence as well. Back on Asgard, the Bifrost suddenly decapitated the dragon's head, spewing green blood and goo all over Scourge. Can you imagine this quote in this film? Are you out of your Asgardian mind? Man, I wish Scourge actually said that, because in connection to Star Trek, Karl Urban was definitely in the Star Trek reboot films with J.J. Abrams. And speaking of which, Chris Hemsworth was in the first Star Trek movie in J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek film. So now Chris Hemsworth and Karl Urban are together at last, in person. Second collaboration, but on screen together for the very first time. Thor doesn't remember Scourge because Scourge and Thor fought on Vanaheim together. It was a long time ago, by the way. However, Thor decides to fly to the city of Asgard as he sees a giant statue of Loki, followed by a theater play version of the second Thor film. Plus, we get some pretty good cameos from Sam Neill as the stage version of Odin, Liam Hemsworth as the stage version of Thor. By the way, I didn't even know that was Liam Hemsworth as the stage Thor. And of course, many people will recognize this cameo, Matt Damon as the stage version of Loki, recreating Loki's death scene from the second Thor film. Ooh, I'm gonna bet that Jay, Silent Bob, and Ben Affleck are probably the audience in this film watching Matt Damon's performance. Or not. Or not. And by the way, maybe there might be a future crossover for that. Thor couldn't believe his eyes of the play that he saw, but he saw his father Odin telling him that he has returned from defeating Surtur. Well, Thor tells Odin that he has defeated Surtur. Again. Somehow, Thor notices something is up with Odin, So he decides to interrogate his father into thinking that, yep, he is Loki. Odin is Loki. Loki disguised himself as Odin. So it turns out that Loki is alive as he impersonates Odin all along. And everyone's surprised to see that Loki is alive. Even Scourge comes in to let Loki know, but Loki scolds Scourge because I think Scourge was supposed to present Thor. Yep, that kind of happened. Thor interrogates Loki because Thor wants to know what Loki did to Odin. Loki takes Thor to the Bifrost, and the two went down to Earth to find Odin, who was supposed to be at a retirement home, but that retirement home got destroyed. Apparently, Odin is at a different location. Suddenly, a magic portal appears under Loki's feet and sucks him into another dimension. The man who sucked Loki into another dimension will be the Sorcerer Supreme himself, Doctor Strange, played once again by Benedict Cumberbatch. So basically, Thor comes to the home of Doctor Strange. He sits with the Sorcerer Supreme, having a beer on his hands to discuss about Odin's whereabouts. By the way, that is also a mid-credit scene from the Doctor Strange film. I'm glad they actually used it for the third Thor film. The Doc tells Thor that Odin is in Norway, and then Loki comes back from falling for 30 minutes, and the two gods get transported to Norway. Okay, I know this next scene, I think many people will actually recognize this, but this Norway sequence was actually a scene that they actually had to reshoot because the original scene was actually filmed in New York, in an alley in New York where Thor and Loki meet up with Odin before Hela arrives. But Taika Waititi thought it didn't match pretty well, so that's why they probably decided to go to Norway to reshoot that scene because they want to give Odin a somewhat of a more peaceful death. Which, to be fair, I actually find that reshoot version to be better placed and a little more calm at the same time, as I mentioned, giving Odin a peaceful death while telling Thor and Loki that Ragnarok is still coming and the goddess of death herself, Hela, is coming. And Hela turns out to be Odin's firstborn daughter. And then suddenly, Odin magically disappears into the unknown. Thor gets mad as to think that Loki caused Odin's death. However, in a black and green portal, the goddess of death herself, Hela, played by Cate Blanchett, steps in to see Thor and Loki. Hela orders Thor and Loki to kneel before her because turns out Hela wants to be queen. Thor throws his hammer, and in a surprise twist, the goddess of death herself catches Mjolnir in the palm of her hands, crushing it into lightning smithereens. Oh my god. Okay, going off topic, if you guys think Marvel never does dark moments, think again, because Hela just crushed one of Thor's greatest weapons in front of his face. Now that is dark. And that tells me that you don't want to mess with the goddess of death, especially if it comes to a Marvel film or based off a Marvel comic book. Hela begins to create her weaponized swords like Gore the God Butcher. No, really, they actually took a little inspiration from Gore the God Butcher in the comic, as well as her comic book look-alike. As she is about to finish the two brothers off, Loki calls out the Bifrost and somehow gets the three inside. Hela takes out Thor and Loki as she enters Asgard, fully regenerated and killing two of the three warriors of three. Hela manages to give Scourge a job to work for her as the two enter the city of Asgard. Thor lands on the junkyard planet of Sakaar, and he is greeted by Sakaarians who look very different than the ones from Guardians of the Galaxy. Unfortunately, the Sakaarians want to eat Thor or capture him at least, but a Valkyrie appears and wipes out the entire gang, except for Thor. But she puts a taser on Thor and tases him out. Valkyrie takes a knocked-out god of thunder to the city of Sakaar. Back in Asgard, Hela appears in front of the entire army of Asgardians as she makes a speech on who she is and what her conquest is about. And you probably know what it is. That is right, taking over the world. The last member of the Warriors 3 threatens Hela to surrender, but she disagrees. FYI, the zoom out shot on Hela when she says, "Whoever I am," fits well with that scene. Kind of makes you wonder how intimidating that scene is, but then jumps into a very funny moment, because sometimes being gone for a long time and everybody not knowing who you are, wow, I mean, just wow, that's a little crazy too. Hela goes into attack mode as she wipes out everyone in the city of Asgard by using her weapons. Man, especially with the choreograph that she does is awesome. By the way, actress and stunt woman Zoe Bell is Cate Blanchett's stunt double in this film for Hela. And for Zoe Bell, you may recognize her at a certain point in almost every Quentin Tarantino film. Hela and Scourge walk in the palace to see if Hela's legacy is remembered. Apparently not, because Odin decided to bury it. Thankfully, Hela decides to reveal her truth by tearing down the ceiling wall as it covers her true nature as the goddess of death. And yep, she reveals what Hela and Odin were like in their prime time. Talk about a change of history, folks. It turns out that Hela turned into a power-hungry tyrant and gets in prison. Back then, she was a noble warrior, but turned power-hungry, but Odin decides to imprison her. Scourge and Hela went down to the treasure room where Hela finds the fake Infinity Gauntlet, plot hole solved, a frost giant source of power, Surtur's crown, the Tesseract, that's not bad, and the granddaddy of all, the Eternal Flame. Hela grabs the flame with her bare hands, creates an axe to the center of the earth, falls down hundreds of feet to revive her army of the dead, and her what looks to be a giant wolf named Fenris. Back on Sakaar, Thor wakes up sitting in a chair traveling through a 2001 Space Odyssey mind trip with one of the theme songs for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory playing in the background, and of course a narrator. The narrator tells the story of the planet Sakaar and their leader, the Grand Master, who is also the founder of the Contest of Champions. Thor couldn't believe his eyes, but somehow he wakes up and screams as he's about to meet the Grand Master himself, Jeff Goldblum. That's right, folks. Jeff Goldblum plays the Grand Master. Get it? Did you guys get it? Jeff Goldblum as the Grand Master. Perfect casting choice from Taika Waititi. The Grand Master gives a little bit of a good background of the planet Sakaar and notices the sparkles on Thor's fingers, as if he were Sparkles, or of course Lord of Thunder or something. I'm pretty sure Thor mentions like he's the god of thunder, but the Grand Master refers to him as the Lord of Thunder. Thor finds Loki, which is being played once again by Tom Hiddleston, but doesn't realize that Thor was knocked out for about 2 weeks. Actually, Loki was there for about 2 weeks. Get it? 2 weeks. Or how long was he actually in there? I mean, I couldn't even remember. Thor decides to compete in the Contest of Champions just so he could get out of Sakaar. Thor gets in prison where he meets up with a Cronin named Korg, played by Taika Waititi, and Meek. Thor talks with Korg about who he has to fight, but Korg doesn't really tell him until the fight begins. So Thor decides to prepare for the Contest of Champions inside a training room right next to a bar. By the way, I wouldn't mind having a training room right next to a bar. That actually would be pretty cool. And he tells Korg about his hammer Mjolnir that he had earlier. Thor tells Korg about the hammer Mjolnir that was made from the form of the heart of a dying star. Thor recognizes Valkyrie and tells her about Asgard, but she doesn't believe him because she is no longer on Asgard or a protector. Thor threatens her and stated that Valkyrie is sworn to protect the throne. That is actually very true because the Valkyries were definitely sworn to protect the throne of Asgard. Valkyrie tases Thor once again, and the guards drag his body to another room where he gets a haircut from Stan Lee in his best costume to date. It's basically a Sicarian costume, but hey, hands down, Stan Lee gets the best costume in this film. Now don't you move. My hands aren't as steady as they used to. By Odin's beard, you shall not cut my hair, unless you suffer the wrath of the mighty Thor. Stan Lee cuts his hair, by the way. Inside the arena, the Grand Master announces his contest of champions. Thor walks in the gladiator arena with a new haircut while being introduced as Lord of Thunder. Who is Thor's opponent, you may ask? The Incredible Hulk. Thor is surprised to see Hulk, but Loki is not because Loki, who is up in the Grand Master's booth, fears the Hulk because he was smashed by the Hulk in the first Avengers film. Thor tries to bring attention to Hulk as Bruce Banner, but Hulk says, "No Banner, only Hulk." Hulk begins to fight Thor and smashes both of Thor's swords and crushes him to a wall. Thor grabs a gigantic titanic hammer and smashes the Hulk, smearing the arena wall for about probably for like 25% of the arena or something. And yeah, he definitely crushes it. Thor tries to bring Hulk back to reality, but by bringing the sun down low. Hey, big guy, the sun's getting real low here. That quote was from Avengers Age of Ultron, by the way. But Hulk decides to smash Thor just like he did to Loki in the first Avengers film. Loki was so relieved that he knows how Thor feels. That's how, yes, that's how it feels. Yep, Loki had that feeling before. At least the Grandmaster can laugh at that. I can see why Taika Waititi likes to poke fun of Joss Whedon in the third Thor film, because Joss Whedon directed the first two Avengers films, especially how the second one was kind of remembered for the crazy writing of some sorts. Thor and Hulk continue the fight, and Thor begins to have the upper hand until Hulk tries to smash him to the ground once more, only for Thor to visualize Odin and begins to gain the lightning power to knock off Hulk's helmet. It seems as though Thor has the lightning hand as the entire audience starts to chant thunder. However, the Grandmaster has a trick up his sleeve and tases Thor. And finally, Hulk finishes Thor off with a gigantic leap and Hulk smash! Back on Asgard, Hela takes the throne and gives Scourge a job as executioner. She even makes an axe for him. Hela decides to go to the Bifrost to grab the sword to open, but the sword is missing. Well, it turns out that Heimdall, played once again by Idris Elba, took the sword and brings the rest of the Asgardians to a safe place while taking on Hela's army of the dead. Thor wakes up in the fights and sees Hulk in his jacuzzi hot tub, showing him the Quinjet in the junkyard. Thor offers Hulk to come back to Asgard and stop Ragnarok. Hulk is like, Ragnarok? Thor decides to go on his own once more because of Hulk doesn't understand it, and yeah, basically everything else that Thor just experienced. But Hulk likes to insult Thor on this one. Smash you. Thor is like, you didn't smash anyone. I won that fight. Hulk decides to say, I smashed you. Thor is like, yeah, sure. Hulk, baby arms. Thor, what? Baby. Thor, moron, big child. Hulk just keeps going on, folks. Hulk just says, Thor, go. Thor is like, I am going. But Thor gets tased by the door. Bzzz, I could just keep talking about that dialogue, but I don't want to keep you guys all day. Hulk goes to train with Valkyrie while Thor tries to get in contact with Heimdall. Thor and Heimdall are speaking to each other on what's going on in Asgard. It turns out that Hela has taken the throne and has an army of the dead by her side. Thor tries to take the taser off his neck, but gets into an argument with the Hulk. After a pouty argument, Thor and Hulk settled their differences and decide to come up with a plan to get Valkyrie's attention. Valkyrie walks into the room to see Hulk, but Thor steps in to let her know that Odin has passed away and Hela, the goddess of death, is taking over Asgard. Come to think of it, why didn't Thor say that in the first place? Valkyrie suddenly comes to realize that, but doesn't believe him. Luckily for Thor, he took the taser control from her so he can remove the taser from his neck. Thor jumps out the window and goes to the Quinjet. He has to put in a passcode, which turns out to be Point Break, because Tony Stark. Hulk comes crashing in the plane, but Thor pulls out a video vlog of Black Widow from Avengers Age of Ultron to bring Hulk back to Banner. And it worked. We get to see Bruce Banner, played once again by Mark Ruffalo, and he is surprised to hear that he was Hulk for 2 years. Yep, 2 years after Age of Ultron. There's an emergency alert from the Grand Master because the Hulk seems to be missing because Lord of Thunder took him away. There's a parade of Hulk fans coming out, and they want to bring the Hulk back outside. But somehow Hulk and Thor managed to get back inside to see a tied-up Loki because Loki got Valkyrie back to her senses. Because it turns out Valkyrie led an army of Valkyries in the past to stop Hela from invading Asgard. Unfortunately, Hela wiped out the entire Valkyrie army, except the Valkyrie herself. And by the way, Tessa Thompson plays Valkyrie. Thor even manages to free Korg, Meek, and the other warriors from the Contest of Champions to assemble a revolution to get off Sakaar. The Grand Master heard about the revolution that is going on and sends his entire army of Sakaarian soldiers to stop Thor, Valkyrie, and Banner. But wait, what about Loki? Well, it turns out Thor tricked Loki into getting one of the ships to escape Sakaar, but tases Loki instead. Who's the trickster now, Loki? Korg, Meek, and the rest of the gang offer Loki a ride to Asgard, by the way. Thor, Valkyrie, and Banner manage to escape Sakaar through a portal inside the Grandmaster's ship, which is also full of fireworks. Hela and Scourge interrogated some of the Asgardians inside the city and wonder where the sword to the Bifrost is. One of them spilled beans, which led to a gigantic door knocked down with tree symbols on it that Hela just broke down with her gigantic swords. But it turns out that she noticed that the rest of the Asgardians are fleeing to the Bifrost only to be stopped by her wolf Fenris and her army of the dead, including Scourge. Thor returns to Asgard and surprisingly takes the throne to Hela's surprise. Thor and Hela are about to clash with each other, along with this quote from the first Thor film: "A wise king never seeks out war, but must always be ready for it." Fenris and Scourge cornered Heimdall and the rest of the Asgardians on the Rainbow Bridge, ready to attack. Even Bruce Banner steps into the fight to take on Fenris, but as the Hulk, which gets Valkyrie surprised, because she didn't even realize that Bruce Banner was the Hulk the whole time. Thor and Hela go at it on each other, delivering blow after blow until Hela scars Thor's eye. To be honest, Hela does scar Thor in the comics. Hela drags Thor's body outside so he can watch his fellow Asgardians meet their doom. Hela makes this amazing quote: "I am not a queen, nor a master. I am the goddess of death. Tell me, brother, who are you the god of again?" As Thor was about to bite the dust, Thor gets another interaction with his father Odin, and he is about to give up. Thor knows that Hela is too strong, and he doesn't have his hammer. Odin tells him that Thor isn't the god of hammers. He is just, Thor himself. I mean, you just gotta believe in yourself. That's the only thing. Yeah, you lost your weapon, but you gotta believe in yourself, which I think that's actually pretty good. Turns out Thor did. Thor comes to his senses and summons his lightning ability to strike Hela from the top of the tower and into the heart of Asgard. Bring on the immigrant song, folks, because Thor is in lightning mode, wiping out the entire army of the dead in a Ragnarok style. Loki, Korg, and Meek also came came out of the mist to join the fight along with Valkyrie, with fireworks in the background. Hulk manages to fight the wolf underwater and manages to throw the dog over the falls. Or the wolf, I should say. Scourge retreats the battle and disguises himself as an Asgardian citizen to escape in the ship that Loki has brought. Hela returns to take on Thor and Valkyrie. However, Thor tells Loki that Surtur's vault is the only way to set off Ragnarok. Loki flees to the city as Thor and Valkyrie take on the Goddess of Death in a visually stunning and amazing battle. Hela's army is trying to stop the Asgardians from fleeing, but Scourge comes out of hiding with his machine guns and shoots the army. But unfortunately, Hela kills Scourge due to his redemption. Loki enters Odin's treasure room, grabs Surtur's crown, and took the Tesseract, and revives Surtur in the Eternal Flame, coming out as a giant devil titan. Hela couldn't believe her eyes at what she is seeing, but Thor breaks the bridge, sending Hela to her watery grave. Or does he? Surtur burns and destroys the city, only for the Hulk to give him a Hulk smash to his molten face. Thor, Hulk, Loki, who came out of nowhere, and Valkyrie escape Asgard, and Hela reemerges to take on Surtur with her giant spears. Surtur defeats Hela and blows up Asgard. Thor, Loki, Valkyrie, Hulk, Heimdall, Korg, Meek, and the rest of the Asgardians are safe inside the shuttle that Loki brought, now trying to decide where to go. Thor decides to go to Earth, but what a shock! A giant spaceship appears right in front of the shuttle that the Asgardians are in. That's right, folks. Thanos is here, on a cliffhanging ending for Thor Ragnarok to set up Avengers Infinity War. Oh, and by the way, the Grandmaster is still alive on Sakaar. And there you have it, folks. That is my take on Thor Ragnarok. What did you guys think? Did I miss out on some moments? Did you actually enjoy this film when you first saw it? When I saw Thor Ragnarok, I was amazed with this film. From the casting, story, visuals, music, and overall spectacle, it's a great follow-up to the Thor franchise, including the MCU as a whole. As always, the chemistry between Thor and Loki is one of the few highlights of this film, including the previous Thor films. Hela is definitely one of the few good villains in this film. She's definitely funny and intimidating at the same time, especially when you have Cate Blanchett in the role. Now that is a good casting call. The story is great overall, setting up the plot of what we're going to see when building up to Ragnarok. Seeing Asgard destroyed was something that no one saw coming. But it did. But it did. The jokes in this film were actually some of the best, even if they went a bit too much. I mean, I'll be honest here. The jokes in Thor Ragnarok were slightly better than the jokes in Avengers Age of Ultron. We also got to see new characters like Korg, Grandmaster, and Valkyrie. Plus, the end of the film sets up Avengers Infinity War, so that's a good one too. The direction of Taika Waititi is amazing, which means he knew how to make a good superhero film. He actually had a pretty good visualization of what the film actually looks like. With a fourth Thor film on the way, we can't wait to see what the God of Thunder will bring us in the fourth installment of the Thor franchise. And that will be it. Thank you for tuning in to Codo Cinema. I'm your host, Mark Codo. Remember to watch movies and stay positive.